Whose butter is this?" Dade Purcell said it loud, loud enough to carry down the length of the Willow Creek Mercantile and out the prop door to the loafer's bench, and he lifted one pale gold round off her trencher and turned it in the daylight as though he'd found it in the road. Serena Vane set the trencher down on the counter and did not flinch. She was a young widow, not yet 30, fair-haired, the hair pinned up in a low plain knot that had come loose at the temples over the 6-mile drive in from the creek. She wore the one good green calico she kept for town, the deep emerald of it, the brightest color in that dim store of flour barrels and harness leather. And her forearms below the pushed-up sleeves were still cool and damp from the spring house. "It's mine, Mr. Purcell," she said. "Same as last week." "Is it now?" He set the round down and wiped his fingers slow, so the men by the door could watch. A jilted woman keeping 6 milk cows in a hole in the ground, salt brine and stoneware and running creek water. "I'd have thought you'd sold the herd and gone to your sister's by now. You'd have thought wrong. The milk seller woman, that's what they call you. You know that? I know what they call me. I know what they'll call it come August, too," she kept her voice level. "Weigh the crocks or don't, but weigh them fair." "Fair," he laughed, "a short thing, for the bench. Widow's price is what your butter fetches, same as any butter. It isn't the same as any butter. That's the part you'll learn." He weighed it. He gave her the low price he gave her every week, and she took it because there was nowhere else in the sandhills to take it, and a man laughed by the door at something that might have been her. Here is the whole of it in 2 sentences before you settle in. Serena Vane had been left at the church door the autumn before by a man named Thomas Rourke, who married the banker's daughter over in Ainsley 3 weeks later and took the town's respect with him when he went, leaving her the little creek place, 6 milch cows, and a name the town was half ashamed to say and said anyway. And the town, being what towns are in a hard country, had decided a woman that foolish about a man could not be sensible about anything, so they made her the joke of the loafer's bench. The milk seller woman, the widow in the cellar by the creek. Now stay with Serena, because the town was about to be taught something none of them would forget. And the lesson had been written years before in a dead woman's pencil that not one soul on that bench had ever thought to read. It was on the road home, at the ford where the trail crossed the creek, that Asa Kell caught her up. He was a rancher off the big grass to the north, a lean man, earnest and a little weathered, in a dark hat gone pale at the crease and a plain leather vest worn soft. And he sat his horse easy, not thinking about it. He was not a talker. She knew him the same as everyone in a thin country, by sight and by reputation, and his reputation was that he was fair and quiet, and that he had 40 head of hired men eating at his cook shack through the summer works. "Mrs. Vane," he touched the hat. "I'll come straight to it. I've tasted your butter at Purcell's counter. It doesn't turn like the others do." "No," she said, "it doesn't." "Why not?" "Because I make it cold, and I make it right, and that's a longer answer than you've got sun for. I've got a crew to feed through the branding and the haying, 30 men, some weeks. 40, he looked at the creek and nodded her, giving her room. "Here's my offer, whole and plain. I'll buy your entire summer churning, every crock you can make, at a fair weight, paid the day you bring it. You'd have the use of my ice house on the home place and board through the works if you want it, for you and the stock both. Nothing more said, no strings on it." She looked at him a moment. It was the first thing anyone in that country had said to her since October that treated her like a woman who made a thing worth buying and not a woman who'd been left. "Why me?" she said. "You know what they call me. I know your butter keeps. I don't much care what the bench calls anybody. I've been talked about, too. He said it without weight, a plain fact. Will you sell to me? I'll think on it. That's all I'd ask. He touched the hat again and turned the horse up the north trail, and he had not once said the words Thomas Rourke, or the church, or the cellar, and she marked that. She marked it the whole drive home. The butter was not a gift, and it was not luck. It came out of a book. Her mother had kept it, a dairy copybook bound in oilcloth gone the color of weak tea. The pages inside close written in pencil and stained with grease and salt and the brown ghost of spilled cream, and it was written in the starving years after Serena's father went under, when it was the cows alone that stood between the family and the county poor list. There was a rule near the front, underscored twice: sweet butter is made cold or it is not made at all. Not cool. Cold, Serena's mother had learned it one ruined summer at a time, and she had set it down so no daughter would learn it twice. So Serena did not churn like the ranch wives churned, warm in the kitchen in the heat of the day. She worked in the stone spring house her husband's people had built into the creek bank, a low place, the door on leather hinges. The floor, a trough of running creek water that came off the sand at a steady cold all summer long. She skimmed at dawn while the night chill was still in the cream. She worked the butter cold, her hands aching, pressing the buttermilk out against the cold stone till the grain came up firm and pale, and she salted it heavy with brine the book told her to boil and cool and strain. And she packed it down hard so no air stood over it, and sealed each lid with brine and a paper tied down with string. Cold and salt and no air. 3 things, written in pencil on a table 6 miles from the loafer's bench, and it might as well have been written on the moon, for all the men there would trouble to read it. She took Ace's offer. She rode up to the home place 2 days later and told him so at the corral rail. I'll sell you the summer, she said, every crock. But I set the weight, and you don't send them soft-packed, and the ice house ice is kept where I tell you, or the butter's on you, not me. Agreed, he said. You know your trade. I won't argue it. Most men would. I'm not most men, and you're not most butter. A small thing, almost a smile, gone before it settled. Bring the first load Thursday. The summer settled into work. She was up before the light, down in the cold dark of the spring house, with the water over her wrists, skimming, churning, packing crocks and counting them, and setting them in the creek to wait for the wagon. It was not pretty work, and there's no pretending otherwise. Cold hands and a sore back and the same motions 1,000 times over, and she did it. And Ace's man came twice a week for the full crocks and left the money. Asa rode down himself the 3rd week, which his man could have done, and stood in the spring house door while she worked, filling it with his shadow. Not offering to help because he could see she didn't need it. You keep the churn down in the water, he said. All of it, right to the neck. To the neck. The cream can't come up warm or it turns. That's the first rule, and it's the last one. My mother churned in the kitchen her whole life. So did mine, till a bad summer taught her better. Serena did not look up from the paddle. You lose 1 whole year's butter to the heat, and you learn there's a cold way, or you go under. She went under first and learned after. I got the learning without the going under. That's the only difference between us. He was quiet a while, watching the water run over the stone. There's a leak in your chinking by the door, he said finally. Cold's bleeding out the northwest corner in the afternoon. I know it. It's on my list past the haying. It's on my list before I ride out. And he said no more about it. Here is where the thing between them grew, and it grew slow without a single word said about it, because they had both been burned and both stopped expecting anything. The next morning she came down to the spring house and found the old chinking between the stones by the door packed fresh with clay and moss, tight, so the cold would not leak out through the gaps in the worst of the afternoon. Asa had not said again that he'd done it. He never said. The week after, when his man came for the crocks, Serena walked out and laid one small round of the sweetest butter, wrapped in a wet cloth, up on the horn of Asa's saddle where it hung on the rail, and did not say why, and the man did not ask. That was the whole of their courting for the better part of a season. A wall rechinked, a pat of butter on a saddle horn. But a hard country does not leave a woman be for long, and the trouble, when it came from Purcell. There was a social at the schoolhouse in July, the whole valley in for it, and Serena went, because a woman who hides has agreed with them, and she would not agree. She brought a bowl of butter, worked and salted and sweet, and set it on the long table with the pies. And Dade Purcell, who had drink in him and men around him, picked up the bowl and held it high. "Friends," he called out, a word of care. "A man ought to think twice before he eats what a jilted woman keeps in a hole in the ground. No telling what turns down there in the dark. Milk, cellar butter." He wrinkled his nose for the crowd. "I wouldn't put it on a Christian table." Some laughed, not all. Enough, Serena crossed the floor and stood in front of him, and the room went quiet the moment a woman did what a woman was not supposed to do. "Taste it," she said. "I'll pass. You held it up before this whole valley, miss. Purcell, taste it. Or set it down and say you were only being cruel for the sport of it. I'll not eat cellar butter. Then you don't know butter from your own opinion." She took the bowl out of his hands, gentle, and set it back on the table. "Leave the tasting to August. August will tell everyone what I can't." She turned and walked out, and that was worse for him than if she'd screamed, and he knew it, and the next morning in his ledger Purcell cut her trade credit to nothing and posted that he'd take no more of her crocks at any price. The word went round the valley that the milk cellar woman's butter had been called unfit in front of the whole town, and half the ranch wives who'd bought from her quiet on the side stopped coming. Then the seal cracked. It was a small thing, and it was nearly the end of her. One crock bound for the ice house had a hairline crack in the glaze at the shoulder, too fine to see, and the brine wept out over 2 hot days, and the air got in, and when Asa's man opened it at the ranch, the butter had turned. Gone rancid and streaked, a whole week's cold work spoiled, one crock out of many. But it landed the same week as the social and the cut credit, and that night a trail buyer's offer sat in her head, a man passing through who'd take all 6 cows for cash money and no questions, enough to pay the road to her sisters in Ainsley and start where no one had heard the words milk cellar woman. She sat a long time at her mother's table with the pencil in her hand to write the sister a letter. She did not write it. She opened the copybook instead, and on the next clean line, under her mother's, she wrote down the loss in her own hand. 1 crock, cracked glaze, seal failed, air in. She wrote what had gone wrong and why. Because her mother had taught her to set the failures down so they would only cost you once. Then she went to bed, and she was up before the light, and she went down to the cold. What the valley did not know, what Purcell did not know as he laughed, was that the answer to every question they'd ever thrown at her sat written in a dead woman's pencil, and the summer was about to ask the question out loud. It came at the end of July, and it came the same as judgment comes in that country, out of a white sky with no mercy in it. A heat wave settled over the sandhills, and it did not lift. Day after day the sun came up like a coal, the far pasture ran with a white shimmer, and the wind, when it blew, blew hot as an oven door. And it went on 3 full weeks, not a day of relief. The creeks ran low and warm. The stock stood in what shade they found, and would not graze till dark. And the butter turned. Understand what the railhead haul was. The market was at Valentine, 2 days north by wagon, and every rancher's wife in the sandhills made butter for it, made it warm in the kitchen the same as it had always been made, packed it loose the same as it had always been packed, and sent it up the long dusty road in the heat. In an ordinary summer, it arrived soft but sound. In that summer, it arrived as grease. Crock after crock came off the wagons at Valentine sour and streaked and running, the cream curdled and the fat gone rancid, and the commissary buyer for the railroad, a big flat-handed man named Hollis who had 200 graders and a section crew to feed, stood at the dock and turned it all away. Take it back, Hollis told one wagon after another. I can't feed men spoiled grease. Take it home. It's all we've got, Mr. Hollis. The whole country's the same. Then the whole country's got nothing. Next wagon. The next wagon was Asa Kell's icehouse wagon, packed in sawdust and creek ice, and Hollis pried the paper off a crock and put his thumb in and stopped. Where's this from? Willow Creek, the driver said. Woman on the creek makes it. Hollis opened a second crock and a third and put his thumb to each in turn, and his face changed. This is sweet, he said, sweet clean through. In this heat. On a 2-day road. He looked at the driver hard, as though the man might be selling him a trick. How? Couldn't tell you, Mr. Hollis. She packs it, and we haul it in the ice. That's all I know. Ice doesn't do this. I've had iced butter come in sour before now. This was made different before it ever saw your ice. He stopped opening crocks then and started counting them, running his hand down the row, and he looked up. Whose butter is this? It was a different question than Purcell had asked across the counter in June, and it had a different answer. Because Serena's butter had been worked cold in the running creek water, below the heat that turns cream, and salted heavy with boiled brine, and packed down hard with no air over it, and sealed under a tied paper, and it rode north in the ice, and it came off the Valentine dock sweet. Crock after counted crock. She had 90 crocks. 90 crocks of sweet cold, worked butter in a country where every other pound had turned to grease, and the word ran back down the 2-day road faster than the wagons could carry it, and by the time Serena understood what had happened, the whole cut-off town was turning toward the little place on the creek. Hollis wired that the railroad wanted all of it. The ranch cook shacks wanted it, Oz's first, his already promised. The store families in Willow Creek wanted it, the ones with babies who could not do without. Everyone who had laughed on that bench in June, and everyone who had held their peace, all of them turning toward the cellar by the creek, and the woman in the green dress who kept it. She did not gloat. There is no scene in this story where Serena Vane stands up at the mercantile and tells Dade Purcell what he can do with his ledger, and if you're waiting for it, it does not come, because that is not the woman her mother raised out of the starving years. She opened the spring house and sold at a fair weight and a fair price, the same to every hand alike, no widow's price and no gouging price either. And the first crocks, before the railroad's money and before the ranches, she carried herself into Willow Creek and gave to the families with babies in the house, the ones who needed sweet butter and had no cash to bid, and she took nothing for those and said nothing about it, and that was answer enough. The reckoning came to her one family at a time, in the order they found their courage. The first to cross was a boy Purcell's own, standing at the spring house door with his hat crushed to his chest. "My father didn't send me," he said. "He doesn't know I'm here. My mother did. She wants to know, will you teach her the cold method so ours don't turn next summer?" Serena looked at him a while. "Come Saturday," she said. "Tell your mother to bring her churn and a strong back. I don't teach it standing still." "Yes, ma'am." He turned to go, then stopped. "Is it true you told my pa August would tell everyone?" "I did." He came home from the social and didn't say a word all week. Then the wagon started coming back from Valentine empty. The boy looked at the crocks glinting on the shelf behind her, the cold water dark beneath them. August told, "All right," he said, and there was something like awe in it, and he went back up the trail the way he'd come. Purcell came himself 2 days after, on foot, no drink in him, and no bench to play to. He stood at the counter of his own emptied store with his apron off and his hat in both hands. "I was wrong about you," he said. "I was wrong all spring, and I said things I've no right to unsay, and I'm sorry for them. Your butter's the only sweet butter in this county, and everybody knows it now." She let him say it. She did not make it easy, and she did not make it hard. "I'll sell to your store again," she said, "at a fair price. The store families need it, and I won't punish them for your mouth. That's more than I'd have done. I expect it is. That's the difference between us, Mr. Purcell, and it always was." Then the Grange sent for her and asked would she stand up at the hall and teach the cold work method to the valley, the spring house working and the boiled brine and the hard packing and the sealed air, so the country would not lose another summer's butter to the heat. She stood at the front of the hall before the people who had named her, and she taught it, reading in places from the oilcloth book. "There's no trick to it," she told the room, "which is why nobody looked for one. You skim at dawn while the night's still in the cream. You work it cold in running water if you've got a creek, in a tub of well water and ice if you don't, and you keep the butter under the heat that turns cream the whole time your hands are on it." A woman near the front raised her hand. "My mother always said the day heat sets the grain. That warm butter keeps its shape. Warm butter keeps its shape to the hall road, and then it's grease at the dock. You saw it this summer, all of you. She let that sit. Shape isn't sweetness. Salt is what keeps it, and cold is what lets the salt do its work. Boil your brine, cool it, strain it, and pack it heavy. Then pack the crock down hard so there's no air standing over the butter, because air is what turns it, air and heat together, and seal the lid with brine under a tied paper so the air can't find its way back in." "That's a deal of bother for butter," a man called from the side, and a few laughed, but it was a different laugh than June's. Careful now. "It's a deal less bother than losing 90 crocks on the Valentine Road," she said, "and I notice not one of you laughed on the way here. Nobody answered that. Cold and salt and no air. 3 things. Miss any one and the heat takes it. Keep all 3 and your butter outlasts the summer. That's the whole of the method, and it isn't mine." She held the book up. "This is my mother's hand out of the hard years, and I only kept it. If you print anything, print her name on it." The county paper sent a man who wrote it down and printed it the next week under the heading of the cold cellar method, and in the printing was her mother's name, because Serena would not let it stand as hers alone. So a woman a dozen years dead was written into the county record in ink, which is a thing pencil dreams of. Asa came at the end of the works, when the crew was paid off, and the grass was cut, and the first cool of the fall was in the mornings. He came to the spring house door, where she stood with her sleeves pushed up, her forearms cool from the water, and the green dress faded now from a summer of it, and he took off the dark hat and turned it in his hands, the same as his kind do when the words are hard, and he did not make a speech, because he was not a man who made them. "Stay for the fall," he said. 4 words. She understood all of what was under them. The ice house and the board and the winter coming, and the thing neither of them had said across a whole season of rechinked walls and butter left on a saddle horn, and she understood he was not asking to rescue her, because she had rescued herself, and the whole county knew it now. He was asking her to be chosen. That was a different thing than she'd been offered at a church door once. "You sure of that?" she said. "There's still a bench in town that has opinions about me." "The bench can keep its opinions. I know my own mind." He looked at her plain. "I've known it since the ford." "Stay for the fall, Serena, for the fall," she said, "and we'll see about the winter." It was as close to yes as either of them needed, and he heard it that way, and something eased in his shoulders that had been set there a long time. The dairy copybook is still kept. It sits in the kitchen on the good grass to the north now, the oilcloth cover mended with a strip of new cloth, the pencil pages filling past where the mother stopped and past where Serena took it up, written in now in a third hand, smaller and rounder, a daughter's hand. "Read me the first rule again, Mama," the girl says some mornings, tracing the line near the front that is underscored twice. "You know it," Serena tells her. "Say it back. Cold to make it, salt to keep it, and no air to spoil it. That's it, every word. Your grandmother wrote that down when she was hungrier than you will ever be, so that you would never have to learn it the hard way she did. It cost her a whole summer's butter and near cost her the cows. Don't you lose it. I won't, and she won't. There is one of these books in some kitchen in every county in that country, a dead woman's patience kept alive against the heat, and the people who laughed are mostly forgotten, and the butter is still sweet. If you have ever kept up a thing your people handed down, a rule or a recipe or a way of doing that the whole world told you to leave behind, and then watch the world come around to it in the end, then you already know why Serena did not need to gloat, and you know why this channel tells these stories. Leave a word below and tell us the county you're listening from. And tell us this, since you've come the whole road with her, when the heat finally came and every other crock had turned. Was it the cold creek water that saved her butter, or was it the woman a dozen years dead who thought to write the rule down where a daughter would one day read it?